Good evening. I'd like to call the Rules Procedure Committee to order at 7:01. The purpose of this meeting is to review the latest edition of the Attleboro Municipal Council Rules of Procedure 2020 edition that was last promulgated April 29, 2020. With us tonight is guest attorney Cynthia Almara, who is the city solicitor, who has made comments on this document. And I'm just going to turn over the floor to Attorney Amara and ask her to just run through the document on things that caught your eye so that we can have a discussion about them and understand how we might best edit this document so that it can be put before the council for a vote. And with that, the floor is yours, Cynthia.
Hi, thanks for having me. Welcome. Good to see you all.
Hi, Cynthia.
I just want to start off by saying I looked at this initially in the spring, and a lot of what I did, at least from the beginning of the document, was look at what was done and didn't find any major flaws. Most of my comments on the beginning of the document are formats or questions for the council, but I didn't really have a sense of what, if anything, the council wanted to change, if anything. So to the extent that anyone shares an opinion that they want to do something radically different with this document, I have not been giving those marching orders. I was then tasked with really focusing on the remote participation because that's completely new. And so that's where the bulk of my substantive comments are. I think the rest of my comments are pretty self-explanatory. Some things I suggested omitting. I didn't see anything that was illegal. I didn't see anything that was wrong. It's your council and they're your rules and procedures. They need to work for you. I don't know if people think they're too detailed, not enough detail. I clearly think there's plenty of detail. The question is, do you like this much detail or don't you? But that's for you to decide. So I think probably the best use of our time, at least now, initially, is to focus on what I really did substantively on the remote participation, because I was specifically asked to look at that in particular, because that's all new. And, I give Richard and anyone else who worked on this great credit for taking it on. It's not an easy task. And nothing is more painstaking than rules and procedures. And they're dry. They're not exciting. There's not much you can do to jazz them up. They just kind of are what they are. My only overarching comment would be to, if there's areas where you think you may want to simplify things or have less detail, make those comments to me and we can talk about them at a different time. Well, let's look at the remote participation because that is new. And basically I thought what was there was a great job, but what I tried to do was to make it more general so that you wouldn't have to come back necessarily, although who knows what will next be given to us, and adjust them if a format changed, if a platform changed, if an executive order changed. So I went through and I essentially tried to take the substance and what I thought you were trying to accomplish and put it in a more generic format so it would be applicable in a variety of situations that are remote for you. If I've done things that you don't think will work, let me know. If you think they will work, that's great. So essentially I started by taking out a lot of the introduction to the rules and procedures, because from my perspective, I've one that if I'm going to be looking up a rule or procedure, I want to get to the nuts and bolts and meats of it quickly. And I think you all know why you're there and what the rules are designed to do. But I think for me, at least, it's easier for me when I'm trying to work through them to have them as simple as possible. And I may have cut things out that you may feel I shouldn't have, in which case they'll go right back in. But what I basically did was try to follow the guidance that we had at the time from the state and try to make it as generic as possible, keeping in mind the formats and certain things that were initially presented. So for example, if you look at page 15 on my draft, which is 3-3.3, I took out everything about the meeting setup and the roles and the meeting etiquette at the beginning. Some of it comes back in later. Some of it I didn't think you really needed in rules and procedures, but if you want it there, it can go. Nothing I reorganized or took out is wrong or improper. It's just my approach is more straightforward and simple because that's the way my brain works best. So I tried to condense everything, and I started off by saying, what's going to happen before the meeting. And clearly you need to have some input prior to setting up the meeting. So I kept basically what the host is going to do and what you're going to do starting roughly 5 minutes in advance so that everyone has a chance to kind of get on board, figure out what's going on, make panic phone calls when they can't get into the meeting, things like that before the meeting actually starts. So that's basically what the first paragraph does. And then I jump down and I go to the next page where I sort of try to lay out what I thought were the goals and what I thought you were trying to accomplish. And I tried to track the executive orders and any guidance we had for what we knew was acceptable with the state and focusing on compliance with open meeting law requirements, because that's really the big deal when you go remote that you really have to worry about. The details of, which platform you use, how long in advance you get on, that's all up to the council to determine. And the important things that I highlighted here were things that I felt in order to comply with the law as we know it today and to not run afoul, particularly of open meeting law, which is easy for anyone to do on a good day, let alone in COVID and with remote participation. That's where I really tried to focus my comments. So I tried to lay out a procedure whereby you set out the goal, which is to maximize public participation because you have to do that. And to give you enough guidance that should be easy to follow and to not trip you up. So you're going to have an agenda. Okay, that's easy. You're always going to do that anyway. It's going to have to tell people how you participate, where you go, how you get there. That's all easy. You've been doing it right along. But it doesn't have to be, it just has to tell you this is what we have to do. Whatever format you choose to use, you've got to provide the public with a way to participate effectively. And so you do that. I've tried to follow what the roles were in other parts, and I had the council president designating a non-voting staff member to facilitate the technical portions of the meeting, because you really don't want an active participant hosting the meeting, because then they're focusing on the technology and getting people into the meeting, out of the meeting, addressing, organizing questions to be presented and not focusing on the substance of what you're really there to do. So that's why we did that. A roll call, we put that in the procedures just to remind everyone, although I'm sure you all have it memorized by now, because the law requires you to do a roll call for everything.
Right.
There's nothing really earth shattering in here.
No.
It's just pretty straightforward. You've got to have a roll call at the beginning of every meeting.
Yes.
Everything must be by roll call vote. That's probably the biggest difference, I think, in remote participation versus live, is everything's got to be roll call. But everyone's got that down by now. You've had months of experience doing it. You've got all the participants, and this is important, is that you have everyone giving their name and address, and that you have a record of it so you know who's participated and so you know who's speaking to you. It's important, we've found, that you give instructions for everyone who's not speaking to mute themselves until they're acknowledged by the chair or whoever is conducting the meeting, because what we've found, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, is when everyone's not muted, you get so much distortion in background you can't understand what's going on. So that's really just a guideline that makes sense given that the technology as we know it now and what works best now. And then you just have basic rules of etiquette. You can't disrupt, you have to wait till you're called on. It basically takes the rules of procedure and just puts them in a remote setting and reminds people, don't do anything you can't do in a regular meeting.
Right.
You can't just jump in and speak. Raise your hand. Someone will acknowledge you. We'll have question and answers. You will have a right to participate. And the important thing is that you must have, in a hearing, you've got to make sure that the applicant can speak. And anytime you have a hearing, you have to make sure the rights of the person who is before you has that opportunity, just as if they were before you live. And that's really nothing earth shattering and nothing you haven't been doing. And it's just reduced to writing. I put in what the order states, and this is at the bottom of my page 16, that any remote meeting shall be conducted using adequate alternative means. And that's because that's what the law requires. It doesn't specify what you have to do. You just have to make sure that the platform you're using and whatever means you're using, everyone has access. So you can't just make it available via Zoom. You have to make it available for people who only access the phone or who access the cable TV that you use. So that's the important thing to take away is whatever you choose to do remotely, just be aware that your audience needs to be able to participate on differing devices. If there are technical problems, you acknowledge them, you do the best you can, and everyone has to just pay attention and be patient. Yes.
So when you're talking about that, like public hearings on Zoom, so typically we'll have a public hearing and depending on what's going on, we'll close it that night. Is there something you suggest we do and not close it that night in case somebody was trying to get on and they couldn't get on? Because we've been concerned doing it via Zoom that people feel like they're not being heard, like you said, and they have a right to be heard.
Have you experienced that difficulty? Have you had people coming up afterwards and saying they couldn't get in or on?
Not me personally, but there has been a little bit of talk. So I'm wondering, if as long as we continue to do it via Zoom, should we not close that public hearing at that time? Should we leave it open for people to call us to, because usually we don't take any more comment after we close the public hearing.
Right.
We don't want to leave the public hearing open forever because, we have work to do and we have to do what we, normally do. So what would be fair to the public for us to do in case they did have trouble getting on or whatever the case? Like, should we not have a public hearing and then close it that night on Zoom? Should we maybe give it to the following meeting or 4 days, 5 days? I mean, I don't, you know what I'm saying?
I haven't had my other clients express that concern, but it depends on the types of meetings. I mean, a lot of times, a lot of this comes up in zoning and planning meetings and Concom meetings, which generally tend to go more than one session anyway. So it's not really an issue. I guess that's an individual decision for the board. I don't think on everything, because some of the things I think you deal with are pretty straightforward, short, sweet, not confrontational, not objectionable. No one's going to come in anyway. But you can always reopen a hearing if you get aftermath from people that they couldn't get in. I would imagine, though, that if anyone couldn't get in, I can't imagine, I can understand how someone may not be able to get in on a Zoom during a meeting, but I can't imagine that they couldn't via email or a phone call get through to someone to register that concern and participate that way, or at least make that problem known during the course of the meeting. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I'll defer to what the board wishes to do, unless you're up against deadlines for acting on something. Yes?
Cynthia, is it fair to say that if we're not violating a law, it's subject to our discretion, but the ultimate guide is fundamental fairness and transparency and open government?
Yes.
So if we have a good faith reason to be that connectivity is proving problematic, we should, Laura, in good faith, continue the hearing. I think it's at our discretion. I don't think there's any legal issues involved. Cynthia, is that fair to say?
I think that's true.
It's a
And
discretionary issue.
my gut would be to not necessarily put in your procedures that you never close a hearing on the night in
Right.
question. But
Right.
I absolutely agree. And if it's a night where you're fraught with all sorts of technological problems, or there's, a major storm going on, so people won't be there. Just like if it was a real meeting,
Right.
if people weren't going to get there, you'd continue it. I think you don't get caught up in the fact that this is remote and completely different from any
Right.
other meetings you hold. I
Yeah.
would keep it more exactly like you said. Use your gut and see what works.
The chair's discretion. Well, I want to follow up because what you've been discussing and what's encompassed in the proposed changes is the current situation, that the council is fully remote. But we have a reg right now that in fact permits remote participation by some councilors as warranted for physical reasons. So my point is, we don't need to adopt, this is an emergency measure, which hopefully won't happen again. I don't think this is what we need to adopt. I think we need to consider 90 CMR 2910, which contemplates remote participation already. Assuming the mayor agrees to adopt it, that's more likely to happen going forward, is that a couple of councilors may not want to come in for different reasons, for physical or health reasons. Then this emergency procedure that in fact had to be imposed by the governor because of the issues with public and open government that, that he had to waive in order to permit this to happen in the first place. So Cynthia, this cannot happen without an emergency order. Otherwise we're in violation of open and public government, right?
If there are other situations that would allow remote participation, either another executive order,
Complete
or
remote
another,
participation.
then this is designed to be broad enough to cover all of your remote situations.
But wouldn't that be by order of the
Not
governor?
specific.
Right, but that would be by order of the governor.
A change in the law that as a
Fine.
result of this, everyone realizes there's greater public participation when you have remote participation. So I tried to take the specificity of this particular order out of it.
Right.
But your comments are well founded in that.
This might be it, but I actually think the more likely scenario is going forward, because we've already started. The other day we had a hybrid council meeting. And I know the president wants to get as many members back into the chamber as possible, but I think the more likely scenario going forward is some councils may ask to be remote in certain occasions for certain reasons. The likelihood, hopefully, of this fully remote happening again will be extreme. And if it were to happen again, it would require a change in the law or another executive order, which would then come with regs to follow, right? Procedures. So I guess my point is, why do we need to adopt this exceptional situation as opposed to adopting something that's more likely to apply? That being remote participation by some.
I think this would cover remote participation by some. I know I have been in meetings recently where some of the board members have chosen to be live and some have not.
Right.
But the bigger concern and the bigger issue is the public.
Understood, of course.
As long as you're going to be having the public still participating remotely,
Absolutely.
I think this would apply. I'm not saying that
Okay.
you can't do both, but
Yeah.
I don't think the issue of the counselors being partially remote and partially in the building
Right.
is really the legal concern. The legal concern is the access to the public and their
Understood.
ability to participate. And I just don't see how we go from where we are now and maybe never again to a situation where it's all or nothing, one way or the other.
Agreed. Agreed.
So I'm willing to restructure and work with how you think we can make
Yeah.
it broader and even more less focused for.
Yeah. Well, I need to talk to obviously Chairman Conti and the other members about whether, in fact, if we want to ask the mayor to adopt. Are you familiar with this reg?
I've
940
seen
CMR?
it, but I have not had too much work with
Yeah.
it in reality.
I think it's something for us to consider. We should definitely, I think, Cynthia, merge the two.
Cindy, please.
Cindy, we should probably consider maybe merging what we have, and if we can get this adopted, perhaps merging the two.
Once that happens, there may be a necessity to do that.
Right. So we need to talk about this. And Rick, I just discovered this a little while ago. I will forward the reg to you and Counselor Dolan. Rick?
What I would suggest, Counselor DeSimone, is
Yep.
to do that in writing. So if you would gather together what you have and electronically get it to Stephen Withers, the city clerk, he can then distribute it to Councilor Dolan and myself,
Okay,
and we'll get it to the city solicitor as well.
Yeah.
And in our next meeting, we'll discuss it.
all right. And if we in fact want it, the way I understand the reg, the mayor is the one who ultimately decides whether it's adopted or not. So that's an issue as well. It's not our discretion. The way I read it, Cindy, I don't know if you know otherwise, but the way I read it, the chief executive officer is the one who decides. So
Well, if that's the case, then Counselor, I would just take that right to the mayor.
I'll ask my fellow committee members, is that something, and I know this is new perhaps to both of you. Do you want me to move forward with that, Rick, or do you want to look at it, think about it, Laura?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's like potato, as long
Yeah.
as we're covered remotely, however it needs to be done legally.
Yeah.
Whether what Cindy has here is fine and legal, I'm fine with that. If we want to add the 90 CMR.
But what Cindy has here doesn't permit you perhaps to stay home. Like if the president wants us all back in chambers, when the emergency order goes away, right? So right now we're under the emergency order. When that goes away, you want to stay home because you still have concerns about your health. That may not be currently allowed under the existing rules and procedures. This would allow that to happen if it's adopted by the mayor and incorporated into our rules.
All right, so I'm absolutely for it. If
Am I
that's the case.
misspeaking?
The only addition I would add to that is I think as long as any law allows remote participation, these would apply. Not necessarily just this executive order, but if we were to somehow go back to the way we were, where everything had to be live, you're absolutely correct that you would want to have additional protections.
Okay.
But just through your procedures in and of themselves, you need to have some overriding authority for the remote. And right now, this is what we have. And your point is well taken about the reg would be another independent means of doing it.
Right.
And it may, and I admit I'm not as familiar with it as you may be. I don't know how much latitude there is for remote public participation under that reg.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I think it's designed to help boards get a quorum.
Yes, it's designed more for the members than it is for the public, but certainly the interest is always in public access, transparency, that, yes. But that's not particularly addressed in this.
I think they could work hand in hand.
I agree, and I think so. I think we may need to merge what you have done, and if the mayor agrees to adopt this, merge them, Rick, is what I'm proposing. So we get it on both ends, right?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree completely.
Okay. So council members can be remote, but yet the public will not lose access if it wants to be remote.
As long as there's something that allows you to let them be remote.
Yep.
Counselor, I like this. I like giving more power to the public to be able to participate remotely. It broadens our reach to the people, which I think is good government. So I'm behind you all the way. I like the idea completely.
So do you want me to send this to the mayor and to,
Sure.
and to Cindy? I should CC you, Cindy?
Councilor Dolan, you seem to be in agreement as well.
Yep. I want to look and make sure how it dovetails best. I think it's definitely something worth having in place, even if it's only to help you have quorums and to have your hearing.
Right, exactly.
But it may be independent of how much it helps public participation.
Yes.
I just want to clarify. But
Agreed.
I think move forward, if that's what you want to do, I think it's something well worth pursuing.
Yeah, and
Council,
even,
I think you got a green light to take that to the mayor.
yeah, and
Thank you,
even
Chairman
with the
Conti.
public participation, regardless, if we were all in chambers, they still have an option of not having to come there. They can, like you
Right.
said previous, they can write a letter, they can call whomever, they can, use email. So they always have access to us that way to voice their concerns as well. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't adopt this, and I don't see why it would be any issue at all. It would just cover us and give us better transparency.
Okay.
I mean, if you look through the rest of my things, they're really just talking generally about, how you open a public hearing, which is nothing new and nothing earth shattering. It's just basically reiterating the same views and making sure that, the public can speak. And that you can't put unreasonable restrictions on how they can speak. Like you can't make them sign up in advance if they want to speak. You have to let them raise their hand in the course of a meeting if they want to speak, or effectively raise their hand, whatever. You can't require them to do everything up front. And just like in a regular hearing, people submit things and become part of the record and they get read into the record, just like if it was a regular hearing and people wanted to submit something in writing to the council instead of showing up for whatever reason. Just because people can participate remotely, you're not dictating or limiting how that can be. So all the means they always had still exist, and now you've got some additional ones. And you still have the right to remove people, and if they're out of order, if they're not listening, if they're using profanity, if they're behaving, just like you could eject someone from a council meeting live, you've got the technology that the council president or whoever is in charge of the particular meeting can have them ejected the same way remotely. Your tech people know how to do it. You don't have to know how to do it. You just need to know to tell the tech person they're done after you've warned them, told them this is unacceptable, and they continue to ignore you. So in a nutshell, that's really what I've said here.
So,
Oh, executive sessions. A little bit on executive sessions, because you do need to have you done any executive sessions via Zoom?
it's been quite a while since we had an executive
Via
session.
Zoom, no, not via Zoom.
I mean, that's the thing. You need to have, and this gets a little, every time I've done it with any client, it's never gone 100% smoothly, but it does get better. You need to have a separate line and a separate Zoom meetings so that you literally get out of the public meeting and then log into an executive meeting. And the only people that have access to that executive meeting are the individuals that should be participating in the executive meeting. Usually you and perhaps me, maybe the mayor, depending on what it is, but the same people you would have in your executive meeting, they are the only people that get the invite and the login information for the remote executive session. Because that's the only way you can maintain your confidentiality in your executive session, is to physically log out and go to a new platform or a new meeting. And usually someone gets lost along the way or has a hard time connecting in, but you wait a few minutes and everyone's there.
So
So
going
should we add a
forward,
line at 3-4.1 that when we call the executive, right now 3-4.1 doesn't deal with the emergency
no,
That's
session that we're
correct.
in.
But I put it up above in the third paragraph up above in the previous section where we were talking about remote participation. If a meeting includes an executive session, it should be scheduled as the last agenda item, and the public should be informed that the municipal council will not return to the open meeting, and then it should have a separate form of access. So I put it in the remote section because it was unique to the remote setting. If you think it belongs someplace else, that's fine. Laura,
I can't find it, Cynthia. I'm still looking for it.
are you looking at section 4 executive sessions?
In 3.33.
Okay, the last
Section
3
4,
paragraphs.
3-4.
It is in 3 dash. It's in, I see 3-33. And I'm looking to see if there's another number.
Okay,
I
my
don't-
executive
It's not,
session,
yeah, it's not numbered.
section
It's
4.
not numbered, but it's the 3rd paragraph up above from section 4 executive sessions, still in 3-3.3.
Did anybody see the comments that Jim, I think he probably wanted to add something regarding the executive session via remote. I don't know if you can see his chat there. So would it be all right if he said something here?
Said something, we're in this meeting right now?
Yeah, because he's the one that runs all our Zoom meetings.
I don't have a problem. It's not my decision
Rick,
who you want to have speak at the meeting. I am fine with it.
can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm still looking for this section and I don't see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's not called up
three
separate.
paragraphs above executive session is a paragraph that's titled during the meeting. Is that the right place?
No, mine says if
No.
a meeting includes an executive session.
All right, so we're not working on the same document.
Rick, I have the same document as you because executive session starts in section 4.
Right.
Section
It
4.
does. But that's your normal executive sessions, not the remote.
Right.
Although going forward, we have to include this, because if this is the norm, remote participation, that needs to be included under public hearings generally and executive sessions generally, and not in an emergency context, right?
Well, I don't know that you have the ability to do it unless you have an authority to go into.
Oh, at the moment, okay, all right,
So
understood.
it is under 3.3. It's at the end of 3.3-3.3, which in my version, and I admit it's possible I don't see the numbers, everything about remote participation is in that section. And mine is on page 17.
Yeah, I don't know what edition you're working off of, Cynthia, but it's not the latest. Yeah.
It should be, it's dated April 29th, 2020.
Right.
Yep.
It's-
That's correct.
It says.
Read the beginning of the paragraph, Cindy, please, that you're looking at. Just the first sentence.
If a meeting includes an executive session.
I have your version, Cindy, too, yeah. But Cindy, while they're looking for it, the remote participation, assuming the council's in chambers, let's go back to the normal, right? We're back in chambers, but we still want to offer the ability to participate remotely. Does that need an emergency order? Because we're there. That's what the emergency order covered, right, initially. But we want people to continue interacting with us remotely, even if we're all in chambers. That's what I'm proposing.
I'm not sure I'm following your question. If
So let's say next week, we're all 11 of us are sitting in council chambers. And the meeting is on Zoom as it has been, but there's a person who's not comfortable coming to City Hall to join us. We want to have them to have the option to still continue to participate remotely. I don't know that that's under the executive order to allow them to participate.
who is the person you're talking
The
about?
public, for example, at the public hearing, forgive me.
If it's a member of the public.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed about their ability or inability to participate in an executive session meeting.
Oh, no, not exactly. I was talking the regular. I'm sorry. I'm taking you off topic. I meant in the regular meeting. Forgive me.
I'm
Right.
sorry, I was confused.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cindy. I'll get back to it. Sorry.
So we're talking about executive session right now. And
Yes.
if I was following, Cindy was saying, okay, if you need to, so if we're in regular session, everybody logs off.
Yeah.
And then comes back secure. And it's just us because the public can't be involved in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
I think when we were discussing that, I think that's when Jim shot us a little note because I'm sure that he has something to add about logging off and coming back secure. So if Rick, if you're okay with him saying something, I'm sure he has something genius to add to this conversation. Yes, Rick?
I can only tell you this. I really like the idea of getting the public an opportunity to join in on our meetings in the committee of the whole from their own home without having to come to City Hall. Because I'm thinking about one constituent on, I forget the name of the street, who's paraplegic. It's a real hassle for him to get into City Hall.
Mhm.
I mean, a serious hassle. But he has a computer. And so if he wanted to address, let's say, the handicap issues of the city, he could come into the committee of the whole through Zoom and say, look, I can't be there because I'm paraplegic.
Right.
And getting into City Hall as a paraplegic is a real problem.
Well, Jim could probably address this, right? So if we're all there and this gentleman that you're talking about wants to say something, maybe Jim could speak to that.
Jim's on the meeting, right, Laura? He's here right now?
Yeah, he wrote a note. I don't know if anybody can see the chat, and said, I could provide some input. And I'd be more than happy to hear his input regarding logging off and coming into executive session. And if there is even a remote possibility for this gentleman you're talking about to join in even if we're all there.
Rick, can Jim speak to us?
I don't see.
Jim Jones.
Yes, but I don't see where he is
He hears us.
contributing
He's out
anything.
there. He had put something in the chat. He's out there. He's manning the controls. Jim, are you out there?
Okay, I got
There
the
he is.
chat. I got the chat.
He needs permission from the chair.
Jim says yes, he just needs permission.
That's you. You would be the one to give it to him.
Yeah,
Would you like to do that?
yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background here. I have been asking for a little while, so my comments aren't necessarily directed towards executive session, although I can provide some input on that. Just as a background, before the meetings remotely started, I generated that document that you're working from really more as a working document on how myself and the cable station would interact with the council meetings and the chair, and whose role is what. I wasn't honestly expecting this to be, added into the actual documentation, but that's fine. I just wanted to let you guys know where we were coming from on that. It was really just a working document for us to understand who's doing what and what's
Right.
going to happen during the meetings.
I assume you were probably working with Council Cobus on that as well.
Yes, to some degree. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So
So
Jim, we added it because at the request of President Cooper,
correct.
who, and frankly, I thought it was very well written.
Thank
It
you.
was very clear, and it was comprehensive.
Right.
City solicitor may have a different opinion.
No. I may just have an alternative form. Maybe knowing, it's nice to have some input as to why things were presented, because when you look at something in a vacuum,
Right.
it's not as thorough. Perhaps those types of things could be addressed in a policy
Right.
so that you can change it as you go more easily, and that it's not as cumbersome,
Right.
for lack of a better word, as an ordinance. Or it might be something that might be best
Right.
used
Right.
as a policy.
We want to comprehend this possibility in our procedures, but we don't need all the technical details in our procedures. I think that's what Cindy's saying.
Right.
To the chair, may I ask Jim a question, Rick?
Sure, go right ahead.
Jim, let's assume in 3 months, we're all in chambers, all 11 of us, but we want to continue having remote participation if it's allowed by the law and or the governor. Would that be possible? If we're
So-
all- I'm sorry.
So let's talk about this. I think it's 96 CMR section 20 or something like that. I don't have it in front of me, so please forgive me there, which deals with remote participation in government meetings.
Right.
And Councilor DeSimone, as you said, yes, it is the chief executive officer, which in a city is the mayor, who designates whether remote participation happens in the city or not.
Mhm.
Once the mayor makes that designation, it is designated for all bodies in the city, whether it's city council or Concom. It just allows them all to go forward. Now, that doesn't preclude you at that point to then say, no, we as a body, we don't want to provide remote participation, but it is the chief executive officer that initiates that. One of the things that, and I'm not an expert on this, but I have read a lot of things on this particular remote participation. One of the key things is the remote participation, as I read it, is for members of the body.
Yes, exactly. That's not the question I asked. The question I asked is about the continuing remote participation of the public.
Correct. So the remote participation is for the body.
Right.
If you're meeting in that physical space, that is the means for somebody to come in. Now, that doesn't preclude, on certain meetings where this person can't make it in, and you want to make special provisions where they could have the Zoom set up to meet in. I think that's a procedure, but I don't think in the letter of that regulation, it doesn't, from my opinion,
No,
it doesn't allow for the
right. No,
the
I'm just asking
public.
if it's possible technologically to broadcast the meeting on AACS as you always do,
Sure.
and also continue to broadcast it via Zoom and get remote participation from people who, for some reason, don't want to come to the chamber.
Correct.
Is
The
that
answer
technological?
is yes, just as we
Okay.
do now. It's really more
Right.
of a procedure on your end, whether you
Okay.
want to have that every time. The other key thing that I just want to provide the input on is with this particular remote participation, again, everything that I've read, you can have remote participation for some of the counselors, but you still have to have a physical quorum
Yes,
in that physical space.
that is true.
So you couldn't have 2 or 3 counselors in City Hall and have, 7 of them on Zoom. You don't have a quorum at that
That's right.
point.
That's right.
So that was just the other input that I wanted to provide. Executive session, if we're still under the governor's order, then yeah,
Right.
going into a separate meeting, a virtual meeting is definitely the way
Yep.
to do it, just as we do with other bodies in the government bodies in the city.
So being mindful of your comments, I think, Rick, I'm going to ask that you and Laura get a copy of this reg before I approach the mayor, so that we can all be clear on what it means and what it might encompass, all right, before we go forward, because Jim makes a good point. It'll apply to all public bodies. The mayor might not want to go that far. I don't know. So I'll have the reg get to you both, and maybe that's a conversation with or without Cindy we might want to continue before we move too far. I'm excited about it, but Jim's point is well made. He would be approving it for everybody, right? Cindy, is that your understanding too?
Yeah.
All public? Okay.
And it is for the board members. It's not for the public.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I have different concerns about, and I don't think you're prepared to put this in a procedure now anyway, to allow special provisions for certain individuals to attend a particular meeting that aren't
No.
available to the public as a whole. Because even if someone can't physically get to City Hall, they have other means of participating. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying I'm not prepared to tell you that that's a path you should be going down or can lawfully go down right now without raising a whole host of other complications.
Right.
But it is one advantage to this. I mean, I think there's so many disadvantages to Zoom. Like you can't really read people. It's hard to,
Yeah. Yeah.
get a sense of where people are coming from, the nuances, the ability to communicate to the people in the room without verbally speaking, I think is lost. And I think that's a huge loss in certain circumstances. But I do think one of the positives that has come out is that some people who otherwise would not physically participate will physically participate in Zoom, where before they might be sitting at home in front of their TV watching it on cable, they will actually dial into a meeting and be more engaged. There are still a certain segment of your population that no matter what, the most they're going to do is get on the phone. And so I think, I think there's all sorts of pros and cons, and I think maximizing whatever lawful means there are to include the public is really what your goal is on this.
Agreed.
And I think the council issue is kind of separate, but equally as important. It basically takes out a little of the Mullen rule, so they don't have to go back and read everything. They have, someone may not be able to physically be at the meeting, but they could be physically engaged in the meeting, even if they weren't in the council chambers. So it makes it a little easier for the board members to fully participate, which ultimately makes for a better decision, whatever it may be. It's all complicated, and it's all new and changing every day.
Yeah.
Councilor DeSimone, you squared away? Do you know what you're going to do?
Yes, I'm going to have Steve forward the reg to you and Laura for your consideration. I think we're going to have to meet again to discuss it and how to proceed. But I do think Cindy raises good issues. We need to think about both ends, our end and the public end. So not anything we're going to solve tonight, because she's just given us a whole lot more to think about.
Well, I think she's already brought up the potential for some unintended consequences. I mean, Councilor Dolan, you seem to want to speak. You have the floor.
I'm just wondering about what Jim said about if you have 3 councilors in chambers and 8 at home, then it's not a quorum. Is that so? Is that
That's not comprehended under the reg that I mentioned. Jim's right. You have to have a quorum. Well, strike that. Let me.
So you're saying we have to have a quorum either fully remote or fully there?
Now, under this executive order or any other order like this,
Right.
any combination, as long as there's a number of bodies, works.
Yes.
If this situation disappears and we're back to what we were in before, and you have this reg in place, you still need to have a
Physical
quorum of your body physically present in chambers.
Yes.
It's not designed to necessarily do what a Zoom does, which will let some of you go back if you're comfortable and some of you stay remote if you're comfortable. It's designed to be more of a surgical strike for a particular individual in a particular meeting.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
So, Cynthia, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, just that I really wish people would call me Cindy.
Cindy.
Sorry,
Okay,
Cindy.
Cindy it is.
And I would say, if the group wants to discuss things and have another crack at this and give me your thoughts and comments of where you all want to go, I personally would find that very helpful when I'm trying to evaluate what you put before me. If I have a better sense of what all your comments and concerns are, or have comments and concerns to work from.
Well, I think the way to take this forward is that we, the Rules Committee, should probably have another Zoom meeting. Where there's only 3 of us, if we could have a physical meeting inside City Council chambers and be one person in the middle and one person on either end of the horseshoe, we should be distanced far enough to be able to have a conversation live. And I think I would prefer that in this case because I'm disturbed that what I'm looking at doesn't seem to be what everybody's looking at. And I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. What do you think of that?
I can do that, Rick, but I actually think we're going to need more than one meeting because I have other issues with the proposed rules, but so I can be there. I'm willing to be there, but I do think I'm gonna probably need more than one meeting, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll schedule
I'm
another. I'll schedule another Zoom meeting. I think that's what you're saying. I couldn't quite make out what you were saying, but
Oh, no, I'm willing to be in person or remote, but I think we're gonna need more than one.
He's saying
yes,
She has a lot to say.
yes.
Yes, I do. These are,
Occupational hazard.
this document's important, not just to us, but it speaks to the public as well, so.
No,
it's-
and I think, I really don't think, like I said before, we haven't had any meaningful discussion about this at the start of this term with me and Kathleen not being on this committee, having really no idea what anybody did prior, because it was a working document for so long. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to go over.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Councilor Dolan, that if we don't get this thing done this term, we don't know if we're going to get reelected, number one. And number two, it could be a whole different team on this project next term, next year.
Yep.
And that's good and bad. I mean, the more hands you have in it, I think the better the end result is. What you're looking at is very heavily influenced by Councilor Parika, Councilor Cooper, Councilor Cobus, who were the formulative people. And before that, it was, I don't even remember who was on the committee before that. So that's what we'll do. We'll adjourn this meeting, and I will, at the next committee meeting Tuesday night, we'll set a date and time for the next Zoom meeting, and we'll keep zooming it until we think we're there. And Cindy, we may or may not invite you, whether or not we have
I
some
won't
questions.
be insulted either way.
We'd probably be happy.
So if we need you, we'll let you know and give you access and all that.
Rick, with your permission, may I work on the provisions that Cindy was talking about, in terms of. the
Oh,
remote
please
pro-
do. Please do.
And-
Yes.
Okay, I like to
Yes.
tinker. I'm a word person, so I'm more than happy to start, kind of working with those. That Cindy's done the big stuff. If I could just kind of hone it, I would like to do that.
All I ask is that, Catherine, you work on the rules of procedure version 3.4. That is the latest April 29th issue.
Yep, that's what I have, 3.4 R2.
Right,
is what I
right,
have.
right. And get all your comments in there, and we'll delay our Zoom meeting until you feel like you're ready.
But what I might do, again, with your permission, Chair, is I would like to make those changes in a separate document, that section only. And then if you like it, we can incorporate it. That may simplify things a little bit. If
That's
we can
perfectly
pull it out.
acceptable. Yeah.
Right, Laura, you good with that?
Yep. Just as long as your boilerplate is that April 29th document.
Okay.
If I could just say something.
Please do.
Keep in mind, I am in Attleboro every Tuesday, all day, and available if people want to stop by, make an appointment to see me, discuss any of the potential changes you want to make, or suggest input, or if you have something you want to show me before the end result, I'm happy to look at things along the way as well.
Cindy, that's difficult for me because I'm the assessor in the city of Taunton, and we're open until 7 o'clock on Tuesday nights. So I probably won't be by to see you on Tuesday.
Well, then we'll have to do it another way for you.
Yep.
I just meant if there are working drafts or working comments or input or anything you want, I'm always there and I can always be reached.
You may regret that comment.
I might.
And-
Wouldn't be
and
the first time in any of my
Councilor
clients, but
DeSimone-
usually not.
Councilor DeSimone knows what I'm talking about.
I usually prefer to be involved before the end result.
I agree.
Usually
Yes, yes,
makes
yes.
my job easier.
But I have to ask you a somewhat a delicate question, but I'm going to ask it indelicately. But if we stop to talk to you, that's billable hours,
But
right? So-
yes, it is, but you're paying for me anyway.
okay. Oh, so it's not separate. You're not going to.
Well, I don't know how the billing gets broken out, if I'm doing a council issue,
Yeah.
if it goes to the council or not, but some part of Attleboro is getting my attention that
Okay.
day anyway.
Okay. In all due respect, I know you got to get paid.
Well, technically, Counselor, in order to access the city solicitor, we have to go through the president.
Yes, I know that too. Yes.
And that will continue to be that way. So we should meet. You should do your work. We'll meet again. We'll meet maybe twice or three times again. And we'll go through President Cooper if we need to drag in Cindy.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Anyone else got anything they want to add to this meeting? In that case, I'll call for adjournment. Motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Second, aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Cindy, thank you.
Good
Thank
to work
you.
with you both.
Thank
You
you.
you were terrific. You and James, the two of you, were terrific contributors to this meeting, and I really appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure to work with you guys. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you,
Good night,
Rick.
everyone.